All right, welcome everyone. We're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we're here for
Fruits Basket, Season 1, Episode 20. We got Ritsu last episode.
We did. It was a very, very small episode. Didn't really focus on too many of the characters, but we gave some good stuff for Toru to kind of pay attention to. Hey, this kind of behavior that you do a lot, very similar.
It's not really healthy, is it?
Not really healthy. So, little sweet lesson there, but also an opportunity for Toru to showcase what makes her so strong and bright and warm for the rest of the Soma family.
Yep.
And also we had some shenanigans with Shigure.
Yes.
Shigure shenanigans are always welcome.
Absolutely. Always. And that editor...
Less.
It's not you. It's him. It's absolutely 100%
him.
Yeah.
So, y'all, without further ado, let's get into this. All right, everyone, now be sure to go check out the reaction portion of the video in the description below, then come back here for the discussion. All right, okay. Well, that was an episode.
It was indeed.
Yeah, guys, I just need to preface this discussion beforehand. This is the second time going through the discussion.
Right, because...
thus far...
Oh, boy. This episode brought up some feelings. If you're wondering, wait... in different shirts and everything. This is an entirely different day. Like, at first we were thinking, yeah, we can just leave it sort of, chaotic and raw and messy in there, and it'll be fine. Maybe throw a disclaimer that it gets a bit... No. We're redoing
the discussion. Yeah.
So
for this one specifically, we went way out of the bounds of the actual episode story. And stopped discussing the actual meat of the episode for, I would say, the detriment of... the discussion's value.
Right. And we'll still get into the kind of stuff that was covered in that discussion, so it's not like you're missing out on some of our immediate responses to the content, but we're going to keep it to a more level-headed kind of discussion and such, because especially when it came to me, I was you could say I was triggered by some of the things in this episode, but or more like one specific thing.
Or something that was kind of hinted at again in this episode.
Sure. Yeah. Right. But this episode was a thing.
Yeah.
My God.
This is probably one of the episodes that is going to be the least rewatched by me because I understand the lesson. There's an aspect of this story overall that wants to impart lessons to us, the viewer, through Toru, who is a very loving, warm, kind, but dysfunctional human being.
Right.
And thus, there's plenty of opportunities for her to learn and grow.
Yep.
There's an outlet from her to people like Kyo, to people like Yuki, and the rest of the Somas. In this case, though, we were introduced to a Soma that was just unlikable as a character, which is great to have because he's, in my opinion, a representation of a smaller form of Akito.
Yep.
And Akito is doing actually ridiculously harmful things that we'll get into that later.
But with this case, the kid is still a kid, and it's something where with the way the episode handled it, it was on the one hand a bit uncomfortable because so much of the episode was spent focusing on Hiro being a little shit, right?
Exactly.
But he did end up learning his lesson. But at the same time, I'm not sure if that will actually cause a change in his general behavior or if it will just make him be a bit more accepting and understanding of Toru.
Yeah.
So...
And specifically steps, of his sister's preference for Toru in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Because there's a couple things with his character that were dramatically changed because of what Akito did to his sister.
Exactly.
And we'll get into that in a second there, because that's
basically what brought it up.
Yeah, it's basically what brought up the issues and such. But on the other side here, we got some really funny, goofy meta stuff, having them watching an anime in the beginning of the anime episode that's talking about literally oh no, even the villains have interesting, complicated inner worlds and stuff.
And oh no, they're taking out their family issues on the people around them. It's oh, okay, maybe we should think about this. And then Yuki's just I think this whole anime is a problem. So
and I love that it's Yuki that brings that up because he was the bearer of Akito's abuse
for a long time
at a point. So he's no, I don't vibe with this shit.
Fuck the villain.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So
Yep.
This brings up an interesting discussion, the idea of hurt people.
Right.
So how much grace or how much mercy do you give to basically the one that is
doing the hurt? Right, because the thing is that there has to be that line where it's like, okay, that's great if you have, cool motive, still murder, right? None of the stuff that's happening in this show is murder from what we've seen so far, right? But
as far as we know.
Right, as far as we know. But there has to be that line of boundaries, and it's kind of in a similar way that Toru needs boundaries with regards to what she is willing to put up with.
Yeah.
Because in this episode and the previous episode, this is almost the story of the show of how Toru is able to help these people that are in these bad places.
Yeah.
But kind of to the detriment of herself, right?
And that she doesn't know her own.
She doesn't have boundaries for herself, and while she'll occasionally get the reminder of like, hey, you really need to take care of yourself. It's okay to need help. It's okay to, not, like do things that will cause you pain and whatnot, and not let other people hurt you.
Yeah.
She is the main character, so it's only natural that she would have the longest journey, right? Because she's the main character, and it's one of those things that can get really hard for me to watch, because it's something where I know that will be an absolutely glorious like character arc when it's all done and everything. But in the moment, I'm like, but Toru is still letting this happen, and the other people around her, they don't, they might not necessarily know in full how dysfunctional it can be, because they maybe haven't known her as long,
responsibility
or it's not their responsibility. Yeah. So and I get defensive on Toru's behalf, because it's like, girl, stand up for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's that's entirely like one of the biggest relatable aspects of Toru is that you try as the viewer to protect her. That is literally a huge portion of the emotional connection I have with Toru, is that I'm like, must protect the smile.
Right, exactly.
Even though, she should stop smiling every once in a while, let other people know that she's in pain. But right. I will also want to protect the smile. So,
exactly.
So that's the divide there.
And with little things like with how her own dysfunction within, like, say, this episode, I don't know if that necessarily is why this happened or didn't happen, but like, did Hiro ever apologize, or things like that,
Not
right?
Really,
no.
I
mean, maybe he did, but I don't think so. And he started to change his behavior, cool, but there is the thing of acknowledging past misdeeds and maybe doing reparations, not just changing things moving forward,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's
his reparations was, I'm going to buy your ice cream thing here,
right? Or
he had acknowledgement of his own flaws, basically,
right.
But he didn't have acknowledgement of the specific things that he did to her.
And I guess that's a true sign that he's still a child, because he's actually very mature for his age, all things considered,
and intelligent,
right? And intelligent and everything. And he's able to have that kind of thought process where it's like, shit, this isn't the kind of person
problem.
I want to be. I have a problem, and yet he's not actually, willing to admit to other people that he has a problem.
He has to admit to himself.
Right, he has to admit to himself. And that's a great first start, right? If you can't do that, then you certainly can't admit it to other people. Right. But it's one of those things where it's like, his arc that we saw in this episode is, of course, relegated to this episode, because there's only so much that we can get into in a single episode of anime, and there's going to be a ton of episodes for this show, but it's the kind of thing where I would love to see, him get to that point where he's like, hey, sorry, I guess I was kind of a dick when I first met, you, or something like that, or, but, yeah.
Yeah. And, I don't want to be like this. I want to be a mature adult. And then she says, well, I believe you. And, hey, I just can't believe you're only in 6th grade. He's like, hey, I wasn't asking you to make me feel better.
Right.
And she's like, no, I'm not. And she gives the advice, basically, of the stuff that she learned from her mother, and basically say, so anyone that commit to themselves, basically, that, what you're doing is, that's a lot of courage. So
right. And it's like, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that one of the things that's really important about the way that people develop is most people know that they have a problem.
Sure.
Most people know where their problems are. They just won't want to literally admit it.
Yeah.
But the awareness of that is not usually something that they need help with.
Nope. They already have their own internal compass.
Yeah. Some people just don't have that, and that's a different case, problem. That's a more extreme thing. So Toru's bright, brilliant light that, in almost a laughable but cute way, Hiro kind of makes the thing of, can you like save anyone? Can you absolve any, issues or what have you? And she's like, no, I'm not a miracle worker or anything like that. Like, but he brings up the interesting point that, well, then why does my sister essentially want to be around you so much? And it's not just that her brother started to distance himself from her, but also Toru has changed by being in proximity to the other Somas, a lot of them for the better. So that's something that the whole family is starting to take notice of.
Right, like she started being in a tent in the woods because she was so unwilling to, admit that she needed help with anything, right? Or potentially be a burden to somebody, right? Turns out, maybe sometimes being a burden to somebody can actually be helpful for them, right? But, so
it can empower them to step up and rise to the occasion.
Exactly. Yeah. In a lot of ways, I would say that maybe in Hiro's situation, if he didn't have his sister that he cared about and stuff like that, right? Like, let's say he hadn't been able to reestablish connection with her, right?
Yeah.
And there had just been the thing that happened with Akito and, beating the shit out of her and everything. And then, and thinking, oh, that's my fault. But then let's say that was it, right? Like, I don't think he would have necessarily been able to muster the courage to have this change because there wouldn't have been as much of a reason, right?
Yep.
Like having that motivation of, okay, here's someone near me, right? All right, cool. I care about them. So, like even in the earlier part of the episode where even though he's still being a shit to Toru, but he invited her over to hang out with them because he knew that his sister, enjoyed being around Toru.
Yeah. Okay, so this episode brought up a very interesting thing with us, and that was the idea that we needed to have the adult perspective on what happened with Hiro.
Right.
And part of that is because Hiro would never bring up to Toru specifically why he's been like this.
Yep.
Now, this is something that is a unique structural decision in the world and story of Fruits Basket in that it is a limited third-person perspective, except for the times when we need exposition through the adults that are usually somas that have a conversation that has nothing to do directly with Toru necessarily.
But it's relevant to the episode and communicating the information that the audience needs to have, so there you go.
So we need to have this discussion.
Right.
But the more focus we get on them talking about the horrible things that Akito does without seeing what the progressively directed action towards interfering or at the very least mitigating what Akito does to bring about the suffering of not just their family members, but specifically children in the family.
That's a bit uncomfortable.
Bit uncomfortable.
And this is where I kind of flipped out a bit because I like yes, we get the moments where we see Shigure because we talked a bit about the discussion outside of recordings and stuff and you mentioned the whole thing of how there was that moment where it looked like Shigure walks up to Akito, he's in a room alone with Akito, and it looks like he could do something violent to Akito, right?
Yeah.
Like it looks like he absolutely despises him in a level of venom that I didn't know we could see from Shigure.
Yeah, Shigure is a very, very complex character in that he shows so many contradictory sides to himself that we kind of have to accept all of them as Shigure until one coalesces into the dominant form, if you will.
So I know that this is something that
I just wanted to clarify here. There was a couple things that in rewatching the episode to make sure that there were some things that we had just clarified here is that Shigure finds out this from Hattori. And this is something that we didn't have in the original discussion, was that Hattori knows about this when it happened because he probably helped with the actual healing.
Right, he's the family doctor.
Of Kisa, that's right. Now, Shigure did not know that this happened at all.
Okay, that helps a ton because he says,
I thought Akito told you everything. He's like, apparently even I'm not trusted.
Yeah.
And then there's this idea that he says, well, Akito can do as Akito likes. Of the two of us, I'm not the one who'll be sorry in the end.
Right.
and you know, Hattori brings up the idea of like sickeningly mature. You're a child, you know. I worry that Akito will eventually take it out on Honda-kun, just like Hiro did. He's like, we really are terrible at this, aren't we? Falling in love and cherishing people. Right. So there's this idea that obviously Shigure is involved in some kind of way in which he will get a comeuppance of some sort. It's not necessarily revenge, but like some kind of comeuppance towards Akito. Yeah. But we, as the viewer, are kept intentionally in the dark as to how that progresses in a positive direction for Shigure's plans, or negative, or not at all. And the kind of the issue that the fact that Shigure didn't know until this conversation does a ton to help. Mm-hmm. But basically the conflict that I find within myself at this point is that with the situation with Hattori before, that was kind of, Hattori's an adult, right? So you know, like it's more of on him to figure out what exactly he's going to do in response to something like that, right? And then we have the Yuki situation.
Which, while really bad, didn't, as far as we know, get violent.
Well, it didn't get into specifics either.
Yes.
That's the thing I think is really important, is that Yuki seems to be probably the one that's actually going to be one of the most dark ones, and they're saving potentially what actually happened literally until we get like some hard Yuki backstory.
Yeah. And the more that we find out of stuff that Akito has done to members in the family, specifically members that were powerless to stop it, then it becomes incumbent upon the other adults within the family to make sure that does not happen again.
Yeah, otherwise they're
complicit.
Yeah,
right.
Yep, exactly.
And with how big the Soma family is, that's a lot of adults, right? Like now,
and there's limited information.
And that's a great point. And that's something that definitely helps a lot with Shigure, right?
Yeah.
But even Shigure's like plotting and stuff like that, and like the fact that he's so against Akito, and the fact that he's like, Akito will be the one that'll be sorry in the end. Personally, I don't care. Yeah. Right? Because having, if your priority when abuse is going on is that the abuser will get his just desserts or learn some, painful lesson as a result of this, that's less important than like the people
fact that people are suffering
and being abused, right?
And this brings up the awkward conversation here, is that right now, if you follow this to its logical conclusion without potentially any kind of like flat out supernatural aspect to how Akito can remain as the head of the family
and not be opposed, like even physically, by someone like because there's when someone holds Akito back from like continuing to like beat up Hattori or whatever, right?
Yeah,
that's one thing. But if you see that it becomes a pattern, you take preemptive measures, right?
Right.
You make it so that they are incapable of doing so.
You literally don't bring people around Akito. You isolate him.
You remove him from the situation. You do whatever, right? Like
Now, this is essentially a mild form. Or that's a more extreme form of what Shigure has already done, in that he has provided a home for Yuki, in which Yuki can be distanced from the family.
And I think that's the thing that makes it so that I don't have a problem with what Shigure is doing, because if theoretically this could be the first time that he's found out about something other than Hattori, who he's an adult, he can choose what he's going to do with that.
Dude, really?
It's shit, but like he doesn't have
we don't know how long. Other than the fact that Yuki was young when Akito was doing shit to him, we don't know how long Akito has been the head of the family.
Right, we don't know how long he's been the head of the family. We don't know if, up until Kisa, Yuki was like the main like example of something like that happening, or at least the main one that Shigure was aware of. So like him giving a home, to Yuki and Kyo, to be away from that. It's like, okay, cool, awesome. But, this is something that gets uncomfortable for me, especially with the episodic nature of the show, where the more we spend time with sort of the really sweet, wholesome, everyday life of the Somas and Toru and Kyo and Yuki, and them just sort of being a family together, the more I'm like, okay, but the stuff with Akito is a thing that's happening.
And that's why the show, I think, has 3 seasons, and why Akito is probably the final antagonist. Toru is his antithesis. He is the darkness. She is the light. There is an aspect of a toxic the family relationship that all of them have with Akito, that Toru has the opposite with her late mother. So there's very much like iconic, like classic forces that are being diametrically opposed to each other. And Akito being the head of a secret society of animal transforming people, with some of them that have special powers. One of them that has a
memory wiping, like
right. I was going to bring up the fact that one of them has a special form, there's
too.
all kinds of things that imply that Akito is the most powerful of them all. And if he wanted to, he could probably just completely dominate the whole family in a way that would be even worse than whatever they're dealing with right now. So on some level, it's hard to understand whether Akito has some kind of like button he's holding over them, or if he literally has like control of them if they're in the estate, or if and
yet it's one of those things where it's like, given the fact that his methods of exacting his vengeance or whatever on them for whenever they specifically bring up like, oh, I found a romantic interest,
that's a big one,
that then he seems to flip out, but he flips out in physical ways that seem to be like very human kind of ways that someone would flip out. It's not like he does some like magical power thing or whatever, from what we've seen, right? So it's a tough situation, and it's something that in the first time we went through the discussion, I had a bit of a rude awakening of my own limitations with regards to handling that kind of subject matter, because it's rough to think about.
It's really rough, and given that this story is, I would say, primarily essentially an episodic story, but it has 3 seasons, there's a possibility that they could go for quite a while with this format, but we have something that becomes a B plot or just a adjacent plot that runs the linear side of things with the Soma family's evolution because of Toru's inserting into the lives of a bunch of them. So we're coming up on the end of a season. Which means that there also could be some dramatic resolution of something that shapes
Act 1 finale or something
up the dynamic.
Like that,
But also it could be that this is this is just how the first season is, for instance. And maybe future seasons are very different. This has been a great first season, and there's been a lot of really good handlings of what I would say is very awkward and sensitive, and I would say very uncomfortable subject matter with regards to the, classic toxic family environment that you can't choose your family kind of thing, so you're kind of stuck with them. But what if you can find your own family?
Exactly.
That's kind of
what's happening.
That's kind of the flow of the story and everything.
Toru and
So, okay. Let's wait and see for now. But I'm very curious to see if I can have like some of the comments that you guys put with regards to this curated and brought up for future recordings and stuff, because this was something that I hadn't even really thought about that much until Jacob brought it up, and then him bringing it up was oh, sure, I guess that's an interesting point.
How does Hattori justify not intervening in some way? Now, granted, he also was on the receiving end of it, so that he might be terrified of Akito or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But he probably tended to Kisa's wounds, right? So how do you do that? How do you look at a girl who's been beaten black and blue, that took 2 weeks to recover?
It means he's literally powerless. That's the thing. That's the conclusion that we've come to over and over and over again, is that the other characters in the Soma family are absolutely powerless to do anything to remove Akito or to really punish him of their own volition or power.
And when we talk about that, we're talking about like a literal powerlessness, not like a societal pressure or whatever of, I guess he's the head of the family. It's like, if you know, because that's not a legit excuse, no, like in those situations that is not.
Yeah. So that's the kind of thing that will be very interesting to see moving forward, how they bring up the mystery that is not who is Akito, what is Akito?
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of thing where I am certain that there's something very, very fundamentally different of Akito's nature to someone like Toru, but also someone like Shigure, for instance.
Sure.
And I want to know what that is.
Well, we only have the two zodiacs left, right?
True.
It's the rooster and the horse, I think. So
probably he is one of them.
One of them, yeah. And I feel like the rooster would kind of make sense with what they've been, establishing so far.
Pecking male, head of a family kind of dynamic.
Right. With
a lot of noise that squawks around annoyingly.
That you maybe also want to see run around without a head,
Let's up another one on the fuck Akito counter. Right. +1.
Because let me just say, Hiro can have this kind of episode and have it work because he's a kid.
Yeah.
And because, what he did was being a little shit, but it, didn't go much past that. Akito, no. I don't care what his backstory is. It can be super tragic and everything.
So, y'all, thank you so much for watching this episode's reaction and discussion. If you want to see the next episode's reaction and discussion right now, though, go check out the link in the description below for our Patreon. You can get an early access there. You can watch full-length timer reactions there, and all this comes with Discord access. You can chat with us in the community there about this show, about anime in general, and also be sure to check out our Twitch channel.
We stream every weekday. The info's in the description.
Yeah, so if any of that interests you, we'll see you there. But until then, we're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we'll see you all next time.